All right, welcome back to the Unvarnished Mind. This is Dolby.
And this is Diogenes.
So today we'll continue our discussion on immortality, in our case, actually ammortality. Um, so in the previous discussion, we discussed mainly why we think ammortality is an obvious choice. And we also discussed some of the counter arguments, namely sort of the opting out burden. Um, so the psychological burden of opting out. But today we want to discuss some of the other counter arguments that we didn't quite get enough time to. So perhaps
Yeah.
you can take the floor. What is the other very compelling argument for?
Okay, first I just want to remind people what ammortality means. What we're discussing is a state of optional immortality, also maintaining a health span, so you don't become extremely old. You can live as long as you want, but you can leave at any point if you get too bored or you feel like you're suffering. Um, And so, anyhow, that's what immortality means to us. And we're doing a thought experiment on what that would be like. Some people say they don't want it. Um, and it seems like the epicenter of a lot of these arguments is the notion that what gives things meaning is the fact that they're scarce. And if you have such immortality, ammortality rather, then life loses its value because it's not scarce like it is. It doesn't have this sense of finitude, like I need to, I don't know, finish all these projects that I've prioritized within a finite amount of time. I don't have that sense. I would just be able to keep going, and I would just get bored from like all these different things I could do, and then it would just become pointless. That's the um, that's the notion that people, I think, the most people seem to have towards this. The philosopher, English philosopher Bernard Williams, I believe he's English, Bernard Williams, quite a famous philosopher. He makes, it seems like in his essay, argument roughly equivalent to this. He also makes an argument that your personal identity would kind of morph too much over the span of time, and you wouldn't really be the same person that you were as you started. Um, we're not as interested in talking about that, um, but it's kind of a ship of Theseus problem. But what he does talk about is that the sort of he says our desires only really make sense within this sort of scope of finitude, um, and yeah, basically, if we just had all this time, like the desires we have wouldn't be desires in the way that they are now. They would be, yeah, just kind of meaningless. Um, that's what he says. So we disagree, obviously, but
I don't quite so I think there's two things. I know there's one argument that Williams makes. That one is about where there are these categorical desires as well as he kind of talks
yeah,
about
okay. Not to,
conditional and
yeah,
contingent desires versus categorical desires.
that's right.
But actually, let's first talk about the first part. So
Yeah,
let's first talk about the so let's sort of nail down this argument about if so the finitude of life is what gives it meaning. People have this argument that because life is finite, the moments have more meaning. And there's also this statement of urgency. I think the urgency thing, that seems a bit more compelling. That if you have
you
forever to do something, right? If you know how, like we know this, I know this intuitively. This if you don't, there's no deadline, you can never get anything done. I take forever to complete tasks. This is actually why I like to do my packing. I save it until the last minute because, as Parkinson's law, heard this few, so many versions of this, but my favorite version is if you wait until the last minute, it'll only take 1 minute. So I try to do all my packing at the very end. I've pretty much stayed up all night just few hours before and just get all the
Bad
back,
habits of packing. Yeah.
yeah, just to get it done. And that sort of deadline adds a sense of urgency, and just having that deadline in your life, right, is what makes you so.
Yeah, I think we're
If
both.
you had forever, then why would you get anything? So that's one argument that people make.
I think we're both like many people procrastinators,
Hmm.
and um so you could imagine the circumstance where we had immortality and we would just endlessly put things off, or put things off for a very long time. I do think we would still want to not just be stationary, um, because like if we just endlessly procrastinated and didn't move on to accomplish anything else, there would have to be some sort of yeah. I think procrastination though is often it's you kind of dread what's coming. You dread the emotional. I heard the psychologist say once that it's an emotional regulation system. You're kind of you're afraid of doing the task, and so you do something that's much like easier. Oftentimes like this, it's just productive procrastination. Something I've done a lot of, where all of a sudden you have an essay due, but okay, now I'm gonna take the time to finally clean my room. That's what I need to do right now. I don't need to do that. So let's do this fast. And like, it's emotionally much easier to clean your room in that hypothetical. And
Jordan
yeah,
Peterson's rules of life.
right.
Clean your bloody room.
Clean your
Clean
bloody
your
room
room.
before you
I'm gonna take this to
criticize the
heart.
world. Um,
Huh?
set your room in order, or set yourself in order before you criticize the world, I think.
Yeah, something like that. I'm butcher. I haven't read his book. I should
Clean your
probably.
room. That's what he's famous for saying. Uh,
Anyways, yeah. So
but
again,
yeah,
there are some.
and so you
I have
could,
a
yeah, yeah.
feeling
So you
sort of
could see
people.
if there was something we were dreading, that would be very difficult. Okay, to give a steel man. Okay, like something really difficult. Like let's say we have a goal and we have all the time, and we have all the time we need to get it done. But like the goal is very kind of, yeah, it involves doing a lot of really hard things, right? Very very difficult
Yeah,
things.
imagine you want to be a great cross country runner. You do VO2 max
Yeah,
workouts
VO2
every other
max.
day.
Yeah, and you stay youthful like for as long as you want. So
Yeah, well,
like,
you already have
no, I'm not.
immortality, so you never have to do the VO2 max
Yeah, I'm not
workout.
gonna do it right now. I'll worry about it later. Eventually, I'll like stick. Maybe in a few decades, I'll like finally, make myself start to train. But it's fine because I'll once I start doing that, and then I'll have as many decades as I want to build up my
Yeah.
aerobic fitness, and so like I'm just gonna not do it now. It doesn't matter if I don't do it now. There's no rush. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, you could definitely see yourself. I could see myself falling into this mentality. The one thing, like, ironically, in contrast to like Williams or these people who say you would get bored, I think I would just get bored of like not getting the goals eventually. Like, okay, I'm bored. Like, I keep saying I'm gonna like get fit. In this example, I keep saying I'm gonna get fit enough to run like really fast marathons. I keep saying this to myself, but I'm not doing it, and I still can't do it. And I haven't done it for 50 years, and I still have all centuries, whatever. Like, and I say, and I'm still not doing it, and that sucks. So I'm gonna start doing it now. Um, I think eventually I'll get to that point. Um,
I think the other thing also that adds to
yeah,
this urgency is that you're always competing with other people. So if you want to compete in the economy, you have to be sort of fast paced, right? And I think the economy is always going to be pretty fast paced. If you want to make money, um, you have to keep up with the current technology. You can't, like for example, if you were, let's say there was immortality in the year 1500, right? If all you knew was Newtonian physics, you couldn't get a job as a professor if all you knew is Newtonian physics. You have to study modern physics. You have to sort of keep up with what's going on in order to stay relevant, right? You have to keep up with the progress that's being made, and
yeah,
it's because it's interpersonal competition. Um, Someone will always try to outcompete the other person, and that competition will keep the strive going. But Yeah, I think yeah, maybe things that are not completely necessary, like to survival, this sort of thing. I think there's a case to be made that perhaps some of the most crazy examples of productivity will be when there are this sort of limited lifespan. But I think
Limited
ultimately
time.
that sort of thing is
Last minute,
unhealthy
yeah.
anyway. And yeah,
That's where you get the adrenaline. Oh, it's the last minute. I'm desperate to do this.
yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Okay. I think we covered. I think that it's these are. I never the one that I never fully understood was the sort of giving life meaning, though. Why is it that
oh yeah.
life's finitude gives moments meaning? It's
Yeah,
just
for
because you
instance,
have so many moments that these moments you just can't remember all of them, and they just sort of mesh into this these memories. And I guess another question of how do you remember 3,000 years worth of million years worth of memories? You have to have some sort of hardware update for sure, um, but just in terms of like, yeah, let's say 100, but like, why is it the finitude that gives moments meaning? I never
yeah,
quite
that's
followed
weird.
that.
But we're talking about the counter argument. Yeah, people argue that if you had immortality, then life would lose its meaning. Yeah, life would lose its meaning. And because of the scarcity, right? I mean, that's mostly the finitude of it. That's what gives it meaning to them, right?
Yeah,
Mm. It definitely drives human like desire for something. That's why people use it as a marketing tool. It very much works. Oh, you need to buy now. The sale only exists for this day, so you need to buy it now, now, now. Like,
a
you
sort of
know,
scarcity tactic. Right?
yeah. Oh, there's only a few of them left. If they're sold, you're not going to get them, so therefore I need to buy it now. Like, you know, it's very much like stitched into a cognitive hardware for easily imaginable evolutionary um, reasons.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think it's. I can't reduce all meaning to that. That's the problem for that um, argument against us. That it's just the scarcity that gives us the desire to want something or enjoy something. That's what I don't buy. That it's nothing but the scarcity. There's many
Yeah,
things I do. There's many things I do, and it's not like a scarcity. I guess it's the scarcity of life. That's what people say. Like
yeah.
nothing.
Well, just the moments
Scarcity of your
themselves, like,
time, and that just
mm,
like drives all of your desires. Is because you have a limited life and you have a finite life, and so you need to do something that really gives you meaning within that finite time span. And if you don't have that, then um, you just won't have drive, um, or your drive will be hollow. Um, mm,
yeah, this sort of scarcity. Like, imagine, you. So look at some notes here. Um, so for example, like let's say like the beauty of like a sunset, for example, right? You sort of want to stare at the sunset because it's very beautiful. You want to look at the sunset, but it's a very transient thing. It's only a few like a few couple minutes where you can see that sunset occur. But if it was there forever, then eventually you get bored of it. It's sort of the idea, or you know, yeah, it
uh,
goes back to this sort of scarcity thing. Again,
you would move on to other things. Yeah, if the
yeah,
sunset
you
was
should stare at it forever. Yeah.
it's it's beautiful out. Like you go to Southern California where um I am, and it's it's sunny often, and when you're here, you take it for granted, and it doesn't really cheer you up in the way it does when you live in somewhere like
In
France.
London.
Yeah, London. Yeah, fuck. we're familiar with over there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, sunny day over there means quite a lot more and can cheer you up. Um,
yeah.
uh,
The Beatles wrote a song about it.
well,
The Beatles wrote an entire song about it.
yeah.
Here comes the sun. Anyway, we won't sing on this podcast. We won't put anyone through that trauma. But okay, I think yeah, it's something that I have a hard time sort of relating to that the scarcity of it is the it's not the only thing in my opinion that gives something meaning. It gives you there's a sort of psychological thing of you the scarcity adds a level of urgency to attain it and
Yeah.
kind of gives you this sort of but you know I'm
Well,
trying to come up
okay.
with a less vile example, but if you had something that smelled like shit and was very scarce, and I don't think anyone would still want it. It's something really disgusting. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much people would
It's
want that. The scarcity is
mainly
not
scarce things
sufficient.
we don't have to try for, like yeah, like or like being bitten by some endangered species,
Yeah,
um, in such a fashion that it paralyzes you or kills you. Like no,
it's
it's very
it gives you like a strange, unusual kind of pain and discomfort
yeah, unlike
that you
any
never
other
experience.
pain,
The
but
venom
like
gives you some.
yeah, and it's endangered species. There's not much of them, so and you have to go to like Papua New Guinea to find it. Like oh, that's a scarce, but I don't get to go to Papua New Guinea all the time. Like
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that in itself is interesting, but like the rest, like the
You're
rest
getting
is
you're
not
getting
so
bit by this venomous animal. Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So there's that. Also, the other thing is temporal scarcity isn't the only kind of scarcity that would apply to you. That would like weigh on your consciousness, on your conscience. In my view, in this immortality scenario, it would not just be temporal scarcity. It's also what we I believe talked about last time, perhaps, namely that consciousness itself or being life itself is very scarce and objective reality, the physical our physical surroundings.
Yeah.
Namely, outside of our planet, much of our planet is dead or largely dead. It can't support humans very well. Whatever, Australian desert, Antarctica, etc. So it's already part of our planet. Or the ocean. We can't live in the ocean. If things like that, and that covers 75% of the Earth. So all of that, and then all of the other planets, and pretty much the rest of the universe, um, we wouldn't be able to live in. So all of that makes us very scarce as well. We just have this one planet, which and like all of that still could give it value on the same, give this immortal life value, um, make you want to keep holding on to your life, and do more things with it because I could very well just be
Yeah.
inert matter, in which case it wouldn't be me. So the fact that there's a me is a rare fact, is a rare possibility. Not to mention, if there were still mortals, then you would have a sense of scarcity about your immortality, and so therefore you would value it and want to use it. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, there's other forms of scarcity, temporal finitude.
Yeah. So actually, let's transition to this is not a counter argument, but there's actually an argument for, I think, having, especially if more people could live for longer lives, be immortal or just have much longer lives. I think there's another case. This case being made that a lot of good things can occur from this as well, societally. Um, I think the thing is the fact that our lives are so short makes us less willing to invest in projects that will not come to fruition within our lifetimes, right? It's hard for someone who's much older to care about the effects of climate change, global warming, and things that will harm the environment and cause issues several generations down the line. So why would you make sacrifices within your own finite life something that won't ever affect you, right?
Yeah, no, I think
Right.
yeah, it drives a lot of evil deeds, I think, or
Exactly.
selfishness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a finite life, so why am I gonna worry about some humanitarian shit that I'm not gonna be alive for? Um, you know, yeah, no, I need to live my life. Whatever, I'm gonna get hired by Shell or whatever, and I'm just gonna be like a oil refining, um, oil refinement worker, whatever, or a petroleum engineer or something. Just capitalize on that, or whatever it is. Yeah, just not really care. It's another topic we can have about what well, I don't want to go on a tangent, but anyhow, yeah. So I
Yeah.
think if you had if you had a immortal life, um, and there's the possibility of life on Earth becoming very much degraded in quality in the future if we don't do certain things to like to maintain that quality, such as whatever controlling climate change or whatever other thing is necessary. Um,
Yeah. And
yeah,
grand projects as well.
we're gonna be
I
around.
think we mentioned briefly in previous podcasts, like
About the future.
going
What?
to like more grand projects, like colonizing other planets, right? Terraforming
Long
Mars.
time horizon. Actually, it's
These sort
interesting.
of,
I heard this one of the things people talk about. When they talk about the China America rivalry, or the rivalry of America as a democracy with like dictatorships like whatever Russia, etc. They say that well, the thing about these places, China especially, they mention this is like in China, yeah, China's government's mentioned this too. This is the problem with democracy. Every 4 years something new gets elected, and they don't have this like wider vision.
yeah.
Like, like, oh, this is how it's going to look decades, decades into the future, 50 years from the future. This is our project. They can't have this like sort of thing that like a sort of more of an empire structure can have, where
Mm,
you're thinking in these longer term, trends or where you want your country to go. And similar, like if you have a finite life, you're stuck like we have now is stuck in this like 90-year frame,
yeah.
85-year frame, and yeah. Whereas if we like in an ammortal life, it would be you'll be able to think along the picture. You're able to do these great projects like you mentioned, trying to colonize Mars, trying to and you'd be able to make the time sacrifices to do those, to try to accomplish those things. Um,
Yeah. We're very pro colonization here, so we want to colonize.
Colonization, yeah, that's kind of colonization, which we support. Colonization of planets, dead planets. Did they find
Spirit
did they find traces of life on Mars? I thought I read that once. That
Fun?
they found some frozen forms of life on Mars, like they used to
Uh,
be.
I don't know,
So
man. I don't know if
uh,
this. I think the jury's still out on that. I don't want to get into that.
they're still out. Yeah, no, I don't.
We'll leave that to the
Like,
astrobiologists and the other um, people,
yeah,
other biologists to figure that out.
like,
Anyhow, okay, yeah. So that's the other. I guess there's some not a counter argument. That's another pro reason to think about. Yeah, having ammortality. A lot of these projects having long-term vision. Also, yeah, going to other star systems and that sort of thing. It's not possible to do usually within our lifetimes. So this traversing the speed of light is you can either think of it as the speed of light is extremely slow, or just the scale of the universe is extremely large, where traversing just going from one side of the galaxy to the other, so 120,000 light years away. So, you know, in the
light years, right? So
light
speed
years,
of light,
yeah,
twenty
120,000.
thousand years. That's the sort of thing, mate. It's the scale. Like I think I mentioned this, but it's just the scale of objective reality. The cosmos is just on such another level than our lifespan.
Yeah.
In Bernard Williams's essay that we discussed, We didn't mention its name. What's it? It's named after an author who wrote a novel. Here, let me get it out.
Which author?
Yeah, so Bernard Williams. Yeah, yeah. So his essay on immortality and why it's ultimately not desirable is called the Macropulos case. The Macropulos case, and it's written about it's reflections on the play The Macropulos Case by Carol Czapek. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, which tells the story of this lady who lived took an elixir of life and lived for over 300 years. 300, and then at the end of it, she's just she's whatever, dejected, doesn't mean anything to her, blah blah, she's bored, etc. Her desires mean nothing, and so she chooses to end it. And it's just, to me, like, the scale is just so pitiable.
Yeah, we extensively discussed. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and we mentioned this last time, but I'd really like to yeah, I just, to me it's so obvious when you hear these figures, like how it, and we hear these things often in our culture, when you hear astrophysicists talking or people talking about like the space, and they throw these numbers, hundreds of thousands of light years. If you're going
yeah.
the speed of light, that's the sort of scale we're operating on.
I highly recommend everyone look the following up. Let me look find it right now. So go to Wikipedia. Um, and type in timeline of the far future. Okay. Um, and look up like so, for example, 1,000 years from now, due to the lunar tides decelerating the Earth's rotation, the average length of the solar day will be 1/30th of an SI second longer than it is today. And it kind of gives like yeah,
Sorry, can you repeat that last bit? What was that?
like the length of the solar day will be 1/30th of a second longer than it is today in 1,000 years due to the lunar. So this is, I mean, it's very insignificant. But then so for example, if yeah, it says 1,000 to 10,000 years from now, Greenland's ice sheet will have completely melted. That depends on the global emissions based on this. So there's all this kind of things that will occur, you know, hundreds of thousands of years from now. You can read this. I've spent hours reading this page. It's a very fascinating page. There's, you know, a few million years from now, you'll have merging with the Andromeda galaxy.
Yeah, they're colliding with ours. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have all these sort of things that they'll occur. But there's all these things that you will never get to witness. You'll never, and like you mentioned, we just our lifespans is just such a tiny sliver, tiny imperceptible sliver in the scale of the universe.
We
And
simply we did not evolve. We evolved to reproduce, and as long as we do that,
yeah,
Mother Nature does not care whatsoever.
yeah,
And the fact that we even gotten to the point where you might have the potential of living a century is just
and
already
all the,
extreme.
and all the great with the great like I've always would have loved to speak to someone like Isaac Newton, Gauss, like see how these people would have I've all dreamt, yeah, it's sort of my dream to have all these great mathematicians in a room and have them discuss. It'd be amazing to have these people still be around, you know. It's such a shame that
Yeah.
we lose these sort of great minds, and yeah, the every individual is unique. You know, there'll never be another Isaac Newton. Um,
Yeah.
so
It's
yeah,
true.
it's just a shame. I think it's a real shame. But let's go back to counter arguments. That's what we're going to talk about today. Um, Another one actually, which is actually a very interesting one,
Yeah,
is
really have a hard time steel manning caveman.
we always go back to the
Yeah,
saying our own opinion. This is an
yeah.
interesting one actually that I found was this notion of risk aversion. So if
Mm,
we do indeed have are immortal, right? So we're immortal, we're not immortal, so we can be killed in a sort of car accident, also some sort of injury and this sort of thing.
yeah. Or
Um,
or you can be like severely injured and disabled.
Maimed, yeah, yeah,
Right.
you can
Yeah, yeah. You're
exactly,
so afraid of that happening to you and like having to finally let go of your life, basically, and
yeah,
you risk anything with you.
yeah. If you are sort of a hell, yeah, you can. So then it's like, oh, like our life becomes so precious. But see, the thing is, we're willing to accept a certain level of risk because we know we have this tacit understanding that we're going to die someday, and it's going to happen eventually. So we do sort of take that into account, and we say, okay, look, there's a certain amount of risk we should be willing to accept. We have to take the. I think I especially have certain hobbies that will be
Yeah.
more risk than normal.
I
But
mean, rationally to me, rationally, it seems like the fact that we are mortal makes it extremely desirable for like you to be as risk averse as possible. Um, because you have so few to begin with.
no, but
Um,
it's more that like if you're
it's-
immortal, you're losing like if you die, you lose potentially millions and millions of years
right.
of life. So now
Yeah, you lose a lot.
you lose 30
Yeah,
years.
but it's less scarce, so it's also like, like that goes against the scarcity argument. So, um,
I don't understand how it goes against it. Like your life is you know
yes.
your life is still scarce
Like
whether you have only one life, right? You have only one
if you've already lived millions of years, it's like or like really old people like even say like, well, I've lived a good life, or like people when they're like on their deathbed, they say it's okay, I've lived a good life, I've done all these things, and so I look back on with pride at all of that, and I say, okay, I'm ready to go because I've done all, I have this long life behind me. Whereas if
life.
some guy dies at the age of 20, you say, oh, he had his whole life in front of him and he didn't get to do any of it.
Yeah.
So clearly, like the way we usually perceive things is the person who's elderly and dies, it's like we don't see that. We see that as natural and not as tragic. Whereas like a young person who hasn't even gotten the chance to do that, that's much more tragic. And it seems like that would also apply in this frame. Yeah, okay, of course, you're never happy to lose your life, to lose all of the millions of years of experience that you've built up. It's very precious. You would covet it extremely, but you've had a great go, and then I just don't see it as being that much more like frightening to lose than this mortal life that we have right now. I don't see like why it's so much worse to lose like millions of years of life as opposed to like a very scarce short life that we have right now.
I think there's one. I think there's two things I would say. One is the opportunity cost, right? There's more opportunity you're missing out on. That you agree, right?
Yeah, it is a high opportunity,
Right. I think
but
here's
it's
I
more
was
but the opportunities are more scarce, like the short life. So that's the case in favor of that. Um,
yeah. So there's that, and then the other thing I actually think there's something about the older person. Also, the problem is in because we have a finite life, and people get as they get older, they get less functional. Um, they're able to the body is sort of slowly giving away, the brain's sort of giving away, and the person on the deathbed who's 90, 100 years old who says he never lived a good life, he's saying that in this body that's decrepit and failing, right? He says, look, I
yeah,
live a good life, I'm ready to go. Versus if you
yeah,
actually
yeah,
were in a youthful body, it's like there's something to be said that I have built so much more. It's like, you know, imagine
yeah,
like
yeah.
you're playing Monopoly, you have all these buildings in the game, you have all the hotels, and you have all this money, you have all this stuff, and then losing that versus losing
Yeah,
like, oh, I'm like one round in the get round of game Monopoly, I have like one
yeah,
house.
you know, you but yeah, I mean that's the case in favor. I think there's cases in favor of either of like being more sad about dying in both cases. Like, yeah, and with the immortality situation, yes. First of all, it's like more or less optional that this happens to you, or it's avoidable. Um, so you don't like have to die, or you don't have to get in a car accident and like lose
Like
all
in
your.
our case, it's not the tragedy's not that someone died, that someone died so soon, right? Whereas in the immortality case, it's actually the tragedy is that he died, right? That's actually the sort of the tragedy. It's a sort of it's almost categorically different.
I just lost so much already, like all of the projects, like the quantity of project, like the number and quantity and quality of projects you were able to complete over centuries.
Yeah,
Uh,
and the experience that you have, right?
all the experiences you had, all of the knowledge you built up, all of that goes, and so yeah, the risk
Like a,
aversion.
like a behemoth, like you lose. It's like losing an entire city, like in that, yeah.
Yeah, but with the way things are right now, objectively for humans, to me, you're losing something extremely rare and fleeting, which will end. And the fact if it ends too soon is very, very sad
Yeah.
because you have so little and it's so rare and it's so precious. And yeah,
Well, the
that's
immortality case is still just as rare. Your life is just as unique and rare as it is if it's finite, right? The finitude doesn't change the rarity of it, really. You're still a unique individual. So yeah.
um,
So I think yeah, this is. I mean, this I think is there's some validity there. Hopefully, I mean, I think just and then I think that will just motivate higher safety concerns and yeah, yeah, higher safety. People wear like airbags, like or wear very protective clothing and stuff when they're traveling cars and flying. But I think there's always some sort of practicality. You hit a wall against. You're never going to drive, you know, 10 kilometers an hour only because you don't want to get injured in an accident. So um, you will always hit a wall against practicality. So I think the risk aversion. I think it's a good point. I think people will be more risk averse, but it's not going to halt society in its tracks, I would say.
so. Another counter argument against immortality, the notion that we should have immortality, we haven't discussed it yet, is the notion that life always has a sort of cycle. There's birth, adolescence, adulthood, and then you're like an elderly person, and it's kind of like this harmonious cycle idea, and that life always takes place within this sort of cycle. So, whereas if you're immortal and you have this infinite health span, then it just you wouldn't be existing within that cycle. It'd be very interrupted, and it would kind of mess with the sort of structure of meaning that our life is. Not sure if I'm really describing it that well, but
I think it's just
okay. What are you saying?
But yeah, we just did a terrible job steal manning.
Yeah, really shit. Like, oh yeah, like it's kind of shit.
We're just regurgitating this shit arguments and like so lacking
Oh,
back,
straw man.
so passionless.
Yeah.
Apparently, yeah, apparently that's his thing.
Yeah, apparently, I don't really know.
This is what some wanker said. Like,
Yeah, it's what the dumbass said. It doesn't even not even worth it to find out what they actually think. But
it's like you're fucking reading some scripture and foreign languages, like saying the words, but you're not really meaning it.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm gonna do with the Quran, mate. But anyways, um,
yeah, I mean, look, I think, yeah, let me try to steal man again. So I think what the point is, there's this sort of natural cycle in life, and maybe our brains are wired to this, and just there's a sort of maturity that you take on when you go from a younger age to adolescence to middle age, right? It's kind of like, yeah, being very young, like an infant, like a toddler, to a child, to like an adolescent, to young adult, older adult, middle-aged person who has children, and then like early old age, later old age, and the sort of maturity that you take on. People talk about having children that sort of matures you, makes you more mature, and like makes you less selfish, that sort of thing. And then maybe like this sort of maturity you might gain from. I mean, this is what a lot of like this Buddhism, this sort of stuff is about as well, right? Where learning to detach from the outcome, and it's not just a cope because of our limited existence, but just almost everything is transient, right? Even if you do live indefinitely, we can't we're not going to achieve everything we desire. There will still be suffering. At some point, this world will end, and most like even if we're immortal, we will still live finite lives. Heat death of the universe, this sort of thing. But it's also very likely that we'll have some sort of accident and die um, much before the heat death of the universe. So like learning to detach and this sort of thing is something we learn because of this cycle, perhaps you can argue, and it sort of forces you to learn to detach, maybe, um, and it forces you to maybe kind of like and take on these philosophies and learn meditation and learn how to detach yourself, because at some point you'll lose everything, right? And um, because of that, you're forced to learn to grow and mature, and as you get older and older, you that the reality that you lose literally everything um, becomes more and more real, and you're forced to sort of reckon with that, and this sort of maturity that comes with that. And also, I guess a lot of the stories, a lot of literature, and a lot of our older stories have to do with this sort of implicit and tacit understanding that we will come to a certain age, and um, there's a sort of life cycle, and it's sort of all sort of inbuilt in our culture, and that goes away is the argument. And to me, again, I think like you, I don't find it a convincing argument to give up
yeah.
so many years of potential life. But
The
yeah,
thing, I mean, so one thing I do find much more, it's a different category of argument, for sure. But I think it's thinking about these cycles of life, finite lives, reminds me of it. It's namely, people would say that if if you were an ammortal slash immortal person and you lived in a world of mortals who you are forming relationships with, and then whose death you are witnessing over and over and over through the course of centuries that you live and they don't. That would be the emotional toil would it would be the sort of constant suffering and sadness. Um, whereas so that'd be one option. The other alternative, if you were immortal living in a world of mortals, is that you would become sort of indifferent to all of it. And in the sense you're kind of talking about, this sort of Buddhist sense of not being attached to people, although they also promote compassion. So I don't know how they square that. But anyhow, if you were this immortal living amongst mortals, you might become callous and sort of lose your humanity after watching all these people um, just die well, well before you ever do. That would be
But
very
people,
sad.
people, this is a very good analogy here. I don't think this is a great argument because I think many people still get Tommies, right? Uh, or dogs that live short lifespans. And they, despite knowing that they will outlive their
Yeah,
dogs, the pets, um,
yeah, that's a good counter argument. Like in practice, is it like worth having a pet just because the pet will die before like many pets will die within your lifespan if you have pets the whole time. So
yeah,
we generally think that's worth it. I do, even though like when my our last cat died, it's very sad. One of the saddest things I've experienced. But we love having new cats now, and we're resigned to the fact that yeah, they will die too. But yeah, um, and
yeah.
it's not like I'm
Are you very
that's the
detached?
thing. I don't see this like black and white dichotomy of like either you become this completely callous person over all this time period, or you become like always suffering because you kept your humanity. It's like I don't see that. I think that's very much already. This is with the pets example. This is already something that we live our whole lives. We watch all these people die. It's very sad, you know. But we still are able to continue our own lives without like just breaking down into suffering. So I guess the idea is that all of that would compile over centuries. So all of that would compile, so you'd be just experiencing centuries of that sorrow building up. But like over our lives, there's not enough time for it to build up. And so therefore, it's like much less. It doesn't pose a problem for like an existential problem for our current lives. Um, but I just don't buy it. Once again, so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So okay, I think that
Yeah.
covers most of the.
What? Sorry.
I think that covers most of the arguments that I've heard against immortality.
Yeah,
There are,
the
of
one.
course, the practical considerations that we briefly touched on last time.
Ah, yeah. So, we definitely need to grant that we, both of us, since we're mostly in agreement, entirely in agreement, um, regarding the subject, that, yeah, if this were practically to be carried out in like this current world full of mortals, this would be very impractical. The population would skyrocket because people wouldn't be dying, but new people would be coming in. So we'd have this like rapidly expanding population. We'd also have all these elderly people who lived for centuries, kind of probably in already in positions of power, imposing the power on people much younger than them. They wouldn't ever leave power because they never die. I think there's that one quote you said of like science advances when dead
Max
scientists
Planck,
return. Yeah,
yeah,
Max Planck who said that. So the idea is that intellectual progress is also kind of facilitated necessarily by the old minds who think a certain way dying and the new minds with a new way of thinking coming into existence.
yeah,
That would be sabotage. I can definitely see that being the case. It would be very, very hard to do this, especially if we only have one planet, which we do.
yeah,
All the practical considerations I can grant. It'd be very, very difficult. Um,
yeah, yeah. I think we would just have to we'd have to restructure the way our society works. I don't think it's unworkable, but we would have to restructure the way things work. But I think, yeah, the things that are, like, we can always have like very strict rules about who can have children, that sort of thing. I think what will be difficult is, yeah, what we talked about, this sort of entrenchment of ideas, old ideas, corrupt or unwanted leaders and political power, right? These sort of things could be a much more dangerous prospect if people don't die. You have to, if you live in some sort of dictatorship, this guy's ammortal. The only way to transfer political powers to kill this person or to capture him and throw in prison or something. There has to be some sort of violent way, means of um, transitioning power when you don't have this. We have like a sort of non-democratic thing. Yeah. So yeah, this could be this is the most I think pressing point to be made against
Like actually,
immortality.
like an actual example, I was just reading about Mao Zedong, the
Mm,
former leader of communist China, and um, the Cultural Revolution that he initiated, largely to regain power in China over his
mm.
rivals within the party. That lasted, according to this article I saw, the last 10 years. It started in 1966 and it ended with his death.
Thank God.
1976. Yeah, and so that it was literally it ended because of his death, and no one was there to keep it going, and that's why China was able to move away from like this ideological anchor that he kept it in, like where you couldn't use markets, etc., and to where they are today, where they use markets, they become very successful, and you know, etc., etc. So that was only possible because Mao Zedong died. But if he hadn't died and left the planet, then they might still be in that state of existence, the
Comrade Stalin.
state of
Sorry.
governance. Huh?
Comrade Stalin.
Yeah, Comrade Stalin as well. Yeah.
Yeah. What a horrible. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think this is actually a very compelling case to be made. This is the one of them. This is probably the scariest thing that even I would be afraid of.
Yeah.
Mortality.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is the biggest threat that would be posed by this. And yeah, I think I would be genuinely worried about that. So,
No problems there.
all right, I think that covers it. I think we covered we exhausted pretty much all of the other counter arguments that we failed to discuss in the previous episode. So we can probably end it here, unless you have any other thoughts.
Yeah. And just, yeah, so that pretty much does it, the discussion. And at this point, it's very obvious that we would nonetheless really um, want that immortality. Regardless of the practical considerations, it would be very desirable for us.
Very practical topic, because we all have the choice to be immortal. So we wanted to discuss something practical for our first episode.
Indeed, yeah, something that really relates to our current circumstances as humans.
Exactly. Well, all right. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week.
Until the next.